The COVID-19 epidemic has been, for some of you, a far-off notion, but it is now a reality, in the very immediate, for all of us. The government took a number of measures, as I said, to try and stop the spread of the virus. Daycare centres, primary schools, secondary schools, high schools, universities have all been closed as of today. On Saturday, restaurants, bars, all shops and non-essential shops were also closed. Any gatherings of more than 100 people were banned. Never before in France's history has the government had to take such exceptional and temporary decisions in a time of peace. But these decisions were made based on much recommendations from scientific committees with a single goal in mind, to protect us all, to protect us from the spread of a virus. In the time of Thursday, scientists and politicians came together and agreed on the fact that we would continue to hold the first round of local elections, and agreed with the Prime Minister that we would go ahead with the first round. On Sunday, people were allowed to vote. And this evening, I would like to thank all of those people who worked on behalf of the government, mayors, all of those people who worked in town halls, all those people who ran the polling stations. I would like to thank all of those French men and women who, despite the context that we are going through, went to vote. And to all those people who upheld all of the health recommendations that we had given out. This evening, I would like to congratulate to all of those people who won the elections. Some 30,000 local municipalities have found their future elected officials. But at the same time that we have medical staff working in emergency wards, dealing with the serious side of this current catastrophe, we also saw people in bars, restaurants, people in the local markets, those people who did not recognize the importance of the measures that had been put in place. They continued as if life had not changed. To those people, I want to say tonight that not only are you not protecting yourselves, and we have seen over the recent changes that no one is safe from this disease, but you're not protecting other people. Even though you may not have symptoms, you can still transmit the virus onto others. You may have no symptoms whatsoever, but you can infect your family, friends, parents, grandparents, your children, the health of those people that you care for so dearly. In the east of France, in the north of France, in the center of France, we have health professionals fighting for the lives of people who are infected by this virus. They are doing their best given the already considerable pressure that they are under. And we are doing as much as we can, and we have to continue to do as much as we can with one goal in mind, to stem the spread of the virus. And I say it to you again tonight. Use barrier behavior. It is the only way to properly protect those weak people, those vulnerable people. It is the only way of stemming the number of people who are infected by the virus and of helping out the emergency care staff. Without any serious signs of disease, call your local doctor, your physician, call the ambulance services, seek their advice. Because if you overburden them with non-serious cases, then they won't be able to deal with the actual serious cases. We have to think as a whole, and we have to take responsibility as a whole. Because each and every one of us must, at all costs, try and limit the number of people with whom we come into contact every day. Scientists say it time and time again, that is our ultimate priority. And that is why, after having consulted and listened to experts from the field, and with much thought, I have decided to ramp up the measures to limit travel and limit the contact that people have to the absolute necessary, as of tomorrow, midday, and for at least 15 days thereafter. Our movement will have to be absolutely limited. What I mean by this is that any gatherings outdoors, any family or friendly gatherings are no longer allowed. Going for a walk in the park to catch up with friends or in the street is no longer allowed. You have to limit your contact, any contact you have outside of the home. And this is applicable everywhere across France, both in French metropolitan France as well as in its overseas territories. Only take transport if you absolutely have to, if you have to buy groceries. And on that point, only do the absolute minimum, the essential groceries. Don't shake hands. Obviously, if you have to seek medical help, do so. If you have to go to work when you cannot work from home, then yes, that is acceptable. Again, if you absolutely must go outdoors to do some form of physical activity, then that is permissible, but not to go and meet with other people. If you can work from home, then do so. If companies haven't yet put in place systems to be able to do so, then they should, as early as tomorrow, do so. This is a way of protecting their employees. But if also for independent workers, non-salary workers, if they can work from home, then they need to do so to protect themselves. The government, as of this evening, will give key guidelines on how to do so. And anyone who does not abide by those guidelines will be punished. I say it with great emphasis. Listen to the medical advice. Do not travel unless it's absolutely necessary. Do not leave homes and meet with other people unless it is absolutely necessary. This evening, we are laying down rules, and there will be checks on those rules. But the only way we can truly get through this is if you uphold those rules yourselves and are conscious of that. Once again, I call on your sense of responsibility and solidarity. After having consulted with the Speaker of the Senate of the National Assembly and also with former presidents, I have decided that the second round of local elections will be postponed. The Prime Minister today informed the head of the political parties and head of the political groups at Parliament, and this decision was agreed to by all. Dear citizens, I take full measure of the impact that these decisions will have on your lives. You will no longer be able to see your loved ones, and that comes at great hardship. Not being able to continue your daily routine comes at great hardship, and I understand that. But we shouldn't break bonds with our families. We should continue to call our families and friends. We need to come up with new ways of finding solidarity between generations. We need to innovate in that way. So I asked you all to stay at home and stay calm given the context. Over the past few hours, I have seen panic taking rife across the nation. We shouldn't give in to fake news, because fake news is so spread easily via social networks. But in staying at home, by looking after people who live in your home. That is a way of dealing with the situation. You can keep good sight of what is essential in this matter. Culture, education, the meaning of things is so important. We need to avoid falling into panic, of believing false rumors, of non-experts and false prophets. We need to be careful of what information we do believe in. But believe me, while the situation we are going through is an unheard of situation, it requires strict measures, and I understand that. But we're at war. This is a health war. We're not dealing against another army or another nation, but an invisible enemy, and it is an enemy that is there, and which is why I call for widespread mobilization against that enemy, because we are at war, and anything that the government decides in the coming days and months will be in that sole objective of combating that enemy. And that is why I have decided that all reforms currently underway will be postponed. In particular, the reform to the retirement regime. This Wednesday, in the Ministerial Council, we will put forward a draft bill to deal with the emergency situation we're going through. It will be a way to enable us to bring in legislation to properly deal with this crisis. It will then be sent to the Parliament as soon as Thursday. I met with the speakers of the Senate of the National Assembly so that we could agree on a text so that legal text will be voted through as quickly as possible. We need to ensure that democracy stays alive, and we need to ensure that the checks and balances that we have in this nation will remain alive. And I thank both speakers for their assistance. I call on all politicians, political people, economic people, anyone in our country to believe in the union of our nation that keeps us together and has enabled us to overcome so many hardships in the past. We are at war, and the nation will be there to support its children, be they medical assistants, medical staff, be they working in cities or in the rural areas. Those people who are fighting tirelessly to fight this disease, we stand by their sides. We owe them so much. We owe them the means to be able to protect them, and we will do that. We will purchase as much in terms of material, masks, alcohol gel, for them to be able to do their work in as much safety as possible. Medical masks will be kept in priority for hospital staff, nurses, doctors working on the front line of this crisis. Medical masks will be delivered to pharmacies as early as tomorrow evening in the areas of France which are the most affected by the virus, before being sent out elsewhere throughout the nation. I also hear the requests coming from many other medical specialists, and we will be able to respond to their requests in the coming days. A minimal service of child assistance for medical staff who have children and who need them to be looked after will also be guaranteed by the government. We need to ensure that they can work in full peace of mind, and which is why, as of tomorrow, taxis and hotels will be mobilized for their service, and the state, the government, will cover that cost, because we are at a time of war. The country, at the current time, will support those areas of France that are most affected, and any areas of France in the coming weeks that will also be affected. My thoughts go out to the medical staff in the far east of France who are dealing with overburdened hospitals. I know what you have been going through over the past few days, and I stand beside you. This is why a field hospital from the Defense Forces will be deployed as of tomorrow in Alsace. The military staff, the medical staff from the military, will be there to help to take off some of the burden that is on those regional and local hospitals. We are at a time of war. And as I said on Thursday, we need to be able to protect ourselves and stem the spread of this virus, but we also need to be able to preserve our current medical system. And in light of that, this morning, as Europeans, we made a shared decision. As of tomorrow, midday, the European Union borders and the Schengen borders will be closed. What this means specifically is any travel between non-European countries and the European Union will be suspended for the next 30 days. French men and women who are currently abroad and who wish to return to France will be able to return to France. This is a decision that we had to come to, because I'm asking you for so much right now, and we have to protect ourselves as much as possible, which is why I call on all French citizens who live abroad. I call on you to contact your local embassies and consulates if you wish to return home. I'm sure that you understand that this health crisis is without precedent, and it will have serious consequences on people of this nation, on the economy of this nation. But this is a challenge that we have to stand up to. We have to do as much as we can to stem the spread of this epidemic. But we should not let that get in the way of being there to support the most vulnerable in our societies, to support small businesses. For the most vulnerable, for those people who are in the most remote areas, we will do our best by working with major organizations, NGOs, to ensure that the most vulnerable will be fed, will have housing, and that their most minimal needs will be met. In terms of the economy, no company, whatever size that company may be, will be faced with bankruptcy. We will do our best, our utmost to avoid it. We will put in place as much resources as possible to do so. For companies, we have set up an exceptional mechanism whereby any compulsory contributions will be delayed. Any loans that will have to be paid off, we will put up 300 billion euros to be able to cover that. Anyone who is facing difficulties in terms of taxes or in terms of social contributions will not have to face them. Any bills, any electricity or gas bills will also be suspended until later notice. For employees, partial unemployment benefits will be extended massively. And this is what I mentioned Thursday, and the government has been currently providing further details on that. For self-employed people, there will be a solidarity fund that will be created by the state. And the Prime Minister is also going to call on the regions to provide support. As of tomorrow, the government will continue to lay into effect those decisions. Because we need to be able to help every sector, and each sector has its own particularities, and we need to take them into account. We need to ensure that our economy will be able to survive this current crisis, because all men and women who are working, who are active members of the economy, we need to ensure that they can continue to have purchasing power ensured. Fellow citizens, France is going through a challenging time. No one can truly foresee how long this is going to last. And problems will lead into further problems, difficulties into further difficulties, and we will need to overcome them. And we need to do so using insight coming from the scientific community, and we will need to adapt the way we behave and act. We have been working tirelessly in France on coming up with ways of treating this disease, and we have seen early signs of hope. On a regular basis, I will speak to you as a nation, and I will give you honest, truthful information about how the crisis is evolving. Because I am certain of one thing: the more we work together and fast, the more we'll be able to overcome this challenge. The more we act as citizens, the more we act with the same soul, with the same notion of patriotism, where we support the ambulance staff, the medical staff of our nation. The more we act with civism, the faster we'll be able to overcome this crisis. We will make it through. We will make it through by standing united. So I want all of us to take responsibility for our actions and to not give in to panic. Because while I'm calling on everyone to live in given difficulties, we will all have to do it. Do not give in to panic nor into disorder. Because we will overcome. This time will be a time where we will get to learn a lot. We will come to convictions, beliefs that we'll have to maybe rethink. But while the impossible may become possible, we need to act. But given the day after our victory will not be a day where we will return to a time before, to a bygone era. It will be a new era where we will have learnt. We will learn from the current situation. Let us raise ourselves up, lift ourselves up to the urgent need of the current time. And I know, fellow citizens, that I can count on you. Long live the French Republic, long live France.
On the coronavirus outbreak, Emmanuel Macron announcing that as of noon on Tuesday, movement will be restricted for the next 2 weeks. People will only be allowed out of their house to go to the grocery store, pharmacy or work. The president also announced he was delaying the reform to the country's pension system. He also pushed back the second round of municipal elections. Macron said, "We are at war with the coronavirus." For more, we can bring in France 24's French politics editor Mark Perlman, as well as Catherine Bennett, who's going to talk about the economic angle with us. Mark, first things first, what exactly did the French president announce as of noon tomorrow? What happens?
Well, movements will be severely restricted and punished as of noon for at least 2 weeks. This was announced by the president. This is a kind of Italian-style lockdown. This was to be expected. We know that the scientific committee he relies on for his decision recommended doing so, and really after seeing that voluntary confinement wasn't working at all with the French people, the president said this would be enforced. We still have to see the details of how exactly it will be enforced. Will it be by the police, by the military?
Exactly. He didn't give many specifics.
He said the government will issue guidelines this evening as to how this will work. What's really important is that he mentioned we're at war at least 5 times.
Indeed.
This was really to concentrate the minds of the people, saying this is an unusual time and there's nothing more unusual than a wartime.
Mark, we're just going to have to go across to the White House because Donald Trump is addressing the nation there on the coronavirus outbreak.
We'd much rather be ahead of the curve than behind it, and that's what we are. Therefore, my administration is recommending that all Americans, including the young and healthy, work to engage in schooling from home when possible, avoid gathering in groups of more than 10 people, avoid discretionary travel, and avoid eating and drinking at bars, restaurants, and public food courts. If everyone makes this change or these critical changes and sacrifices now, we will rally together as one nation, and we will defeat the virus, and we're going to have a big celebration all together. With several weeks of focused action, we can turn the corner and turn it quickly. A lot of progress has been made. I'm also pleased to report today that a vaccine candidate has begun the phase 1 clinical trial. This is one of the fastest vaccine development launches in history, not even close. We're also racing to develop antiviral therapies and other treatments, and we've had some promising results, early results, but promising, to reduce the severity and the duration of the symptoms. And I have to say that our government is prepared to do whatever it takes. Whatever it takes, we're doing. We're doing it in every way. And with that, I'd like to just introduce Dr. Birx, who's going to discuss some of the things that we strongly recommend. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think you know over the last months we've taken very bold action to stop the virus from coming to our shores. And because of that, we gained time to really get together and understand the progress across the globe of what has worked and what hasn't worked. We now need to appeal to every single American so that they can have their role in stopping the spread of this virus. We've talked about things before about washing your hands, but we really want to focus on if you are sick, no matter who you are, please stay home. If someone in your household is diagnosed with this virus, the entire household should quarantine in the house to prevent spread of the virus to others. The reason we're taking these strong and bold steps is because we know there is virus spread before you develop symptoms, and then we know that there's a large group, we don't know the precise percent yet, that actually is asymptomatic or has such mild cases that they continue to spread the virus. If your children are sick, please keep them home. Now to our older population or those with pre-existing medical conditions, everyone in the household needs to focus on protecting them. Everyone in the household. I want to speak particularly to our largest generation now, our millennials. I have the mom of two wonderful millennial young women who are bright and hardworking, and I will tell you what I told to them. They are the core group that will stop this virus. They are the group that communicates successfully, independent of picking up a phone. They intuitively know how to contact each other without being in large social gatherings. We're asking all of them to hold their gatherings to under 10 people, not just in bars and restaurants, but in homes. We really want people to be separated at this time, to be able to address this virus comprehensively that we cannot see, for which we don't have a vaccine or a therapeutic. The only thing we have right now is the amazing ingenuity and compassion of the American people. We're appealing to all Americans to take these steps, to protect each other and to ensure that the virus doesn't spread. These guidelines are very specific, they're very detailed. They will only work if every American takes this together to heart.
You were listening to the U.S. Coronavirus Task Force speaking there. The Trump administration urging the public to avoid large gatherings, anything larger than 10 people over the course of the next 15 days. We're going to switch gears now and head back to here in France. So we had new measures announced by the French President Emmanuel Macron tonight. We can bring in Mark Perlman once again. Mark, good evening to you. So from noon tomorrow, Emmanuel Macron has restricted the movement of the people here in France.
Yes, for at least 15 days, saying people should essentially restrict very largely their movements. They're allowed to go to work. They're allowed to go and buy groceries, go to the doctor, but not go out for a stroll. And he mentioned that he had seen those images of Parisians walking side by side in parks and gathering despite the closures of bars and restaurants. And so he decided, based upon the scientific committee he consulted today, to go the Italian way, essentially, and a severe lockdown with punishments. We still don't have the details out, and he said that also there would be a more political decision, the decision to postpone the second round of the municipal election. The first round was held yesterday. He said essentially those results would stay. In over 30,000 towns, the mayor has already been elected, but the second round will be postponed, probably June 21st, in 3 months' time, is the date that was agreed upon with other political leaders. Also, he said that the current reforms, and especially, he mentioned it, the very controversial pension system reform, would also be postponed before announcing a whole battery of emergency measures to support the ailing economy. Essentially said there would be no bankruptcy, loan guarantees would be there, that the bills for electricity and for housing would not need to be paid immediately, that some of the taxes could be postponed and so on, basically saying we're going to spend whatever is necessary. Now is not the time for budgetary constraints and so on. We need essentially to open the wallet and to make sure we're salvaging the economy.
Because he said, as you mentioned before, we are at war with this coronavirus.
This is what people will remember, and this is what the president wants people to remember, and the headlines of the papers to be tomorrow. We're at war. He repeated it 5 times, 6 times. It's not an enemy. It's an invisible enemy. It's a health war, but it's a war. And when it's a war, it means exceptional measures, and he said behave responsibly, we'll get through this, obviously will not be the same after this crisis than before, but right now we're in the midst of this crisis. What he didn't say, but he said it a few days ago, is that this is only the beginning, and there's a whole lot of pressure already on the health infrastructure, especially in the north of France, in the east of France, here in the Paris region. He announced also a few emergency measures that were called for by the health sector, especially the delivery of masks. So he said as of tomorrow night, pharmacies around the country will be able to distribute more masks, because clearly this is what they're hearing. He also said the military hospital would be set up in the Alsace region. So essentially saying, okay, this is a war emergency situation, so we have to really make the maximum as possible. Obviously now is not really the time for the end of the tunnel. He said there's some hope in terms of clinical tests being carried out, but right now, essentially, the French have to realize that the only solution, as far as the experience from China shows, is confinement, essentially staying home, not interacting with anyone unless you really need to.
But, you know, Mark, if you compare this speech from Emmanuel Macron with his address last Thursday, here he's a bit more pessimistic, because here he's saying problems will lead to further problems. And I guess want to know, because since Thursday, the government each day has announced stricter and stricter measures to contain the spread of this coronavirus outbreak that has infected more than 5,000 people in the country.
Yes. However, there's not much more than you can do than a full-fledged lockdown. I guess the proof will be in the pudding and the implementation phase that will start tomorrow as of noon. But clearly, it's a president who 10 days ago was telling the French, you know, you should go to the theater.
Yeah.
Don't be worried. And the coronavirus was already there in China for several weeks, month even. It was already hitting Italy. The Italians were telling the French people, you're completely crazy. You don't realize what's coming. And the French were saying, you know, we're going to essentially postpone this. Maybe in the end, the health system in France will be able to resist better than the Italian health system, because there was an effort to delay the full-fledged outbreak of the coronavirus, but there's no evidence of that. And so clearly, yes, you're seeing a very worried president. He wants the French to be worried. This is why you heard war, 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 and war.
Let's bring in France 24's Catherine Bennett. Catherine, we had some measures announced from the French president, economic measures to help cushion the impact of the coronavirus.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So one of the things that he did say is he wanted to make sure that companies put in place measures to help people work from home if the companies haven't already done that. And of course, I think up until now, companies were sort of encouraged to be asking their employees to work from home if possible. But obviously, we're seeing a much stricter tone from Macron in this message. So I think the message will really have got through to companies who will now put that in place if they didn't already have it. One of the other things he said is that he was quite firm about the fact that no company will be faced with bankruptcy. And so as part of that, he was saying that compulsory contributions, social contributions on the part of companies wouldn't have to be paid. He talked about loan forgiveness, tax relief for companies, and all of that as part of a wider message where he said he wanted to ensure that citizens keep their purchasing power. And of course, this is quite interesting. This is following right in the footsteps of Italy, which earlier today announced 25 billion euros of spending measures, hoping to throw a sort of lifeline to small and medium businesses and to citizens across the country. Of course, we know Italy has been going through a severe kind of lockdown, and it looks like France is going to be trying to put in place similar measures as well. And I think, of course, this is because Europe in particular, as it is now the epicenter of the virus, that shifted from China. And early today, we saw some industrial figures come out of China, which are the worst figures that we've ever had on record from China. And so I think Europe is wary about falling into the same trap, and they want to really keep the financial markets working as smoothly as possible.
Which is kind of ridiculous, because every day you have financial markets that are seeing fresher and fresher losses, but that's something the French president mentioned. He said it's not the time to sit and think about the economic consequences of this this coronavirus, but it's just everyone needs to play their part. We all need to sacrifice to help face this pandemic.
Yes, absolutely. But clearly, as we just discussed, there's an emergency. The G7 came out with a statement saying essentially we're going to pull out all the stops to make sure we can say the IMF and so on. Donald Trump, who's been essentially measuring his popularity with the Dow Jones, has
now he's scrambling. Yeah.
Yes, he's been scrambling, and this is probably why you saw him grim-faced tonight announcing also some confinement or confinement-like measures in the U.S. as well. Yeah. Clearly, the French president is throwing all the recipes that we've heard for years, especially those from Germany about fiscal restraint, and we have to make sure we keep the budget. This is out of the window right now because everything is out of the window.
Because it's unprecedented.
Yes,
times.
And so this is why you have those who remember 9/11 in the U.S. Happen to be there. This is obviously a very different kind of war, but we heard this vocabulary, and this was a way to essentially mobilize the minds and also all the energies of the people, saying, okay, we have to forget about our usual way of life. This is a big change. France has witnessed this to a certain degree after the terrorist attacks, but this is clearly different because you're asked to stay home, to work from home, and not to move around. And freedom of movement is one of the most cherished freedom in the Western democracies. This has to be suspended for at least 2 weeks and probably more, because according to what we're seeing all around, and the example from China obviously is the only one we have, it's more than 2 weeks, much more than that.
Indeed. Now, I just want to talk about the borders, because he did mention a decision that the Europeans have taken with regards to closing the border for the next 30 days.
Yes, he said as of tomorrow noon, the borders of the European Union will essentially be shut, except for those Europeans outside of the EU willing to come back. And so several days ago, everyone was up in arms here saying Donald Trump shut down the borders of the U.S. With the EU.
How is that going to help? Yeah.
This is really nasty. This is really bad, and this is making Europeans look bad. Well, the WHO now says Europe is the heart of the epidemic, and the Europeans are saying, well, we shouldn't be traveling, or we shouldn't be receiving travelers from outside the EU. So yes, we are seeing Russia shut down its borders, Spain. Every day there are several countries that are figuring out that the only proven way out of this virus is confinement, national, local, and personal.
Catherine, the French president did mention masks and hand sanitizers in his address. What did he have to say about that? Because I went to 2 pharmacies today in Paris. There are no masks. They're not selling them.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And this is because, much like other countries as well, they absolutely want to make sure that masks and hand sanitizing gel is all going to health workers and to people who are very much on the front line of dealing with this epidemic. So although, if you've been out and about in Paris recently, you've seen that there are some people wearing masks.
A lot of people
some people wearing gloves as well. I don't know where they're getting them from, because I can't find them in any pharmacies either. And I think it's quite important that they are putting in these measures that will allow people who really do need that, so those who are already infectious, and doctors and nurses who are treating people who already have the virus. It's important that they have those products.
Yes, I mean, this has been really one of the key demands. And 10 years ago, there was an epidemic, the H1N1 epidemic, and everyone thought that this would be really a pandemic. And so France had millions of masks that weren't used. So probably this created a negative precedent, because they said, well, we kept them for years and then we threw them away. So why have a huge stock of masks? Well, now you need them and you don't have them. And Italy is getting masks from obviously China, ironically enough. So yes, the president is trying to say that, okay, we're ramping up the efforts ourselves, but the main effort is obviously from every French man and woman today.
Now, Mark, he did also make that decision about pushing back the local elections, the municipal elections. How will the opposition view that highly political decision which he's taken now?
Well, they're all in agreement. Obviously, they've all agreed. They were in disagreement a few days ago, which is why, after hesitating, he went ahead and decided to hold this election until very late before his address last last Thursday night to the nation, he wanted to postpone those elections because he thought that they would be threatened, not so much round one, but round two, which was scheduled for the coming Sunday. But the opposition told him, you can't do this. It's already too late. And you're probably doing this because you're fearing that your party is going to lose big time those elections. So the president relented. He probably regrets those decisions. He consulted today with the opposition and told them what we're going to do is we're going to essentially freeze the election, which is round one essentially is in the books, but round two will be delayed. So the mayors elected in round one are going to be the mayors, and the percentages, the results we saw in round one will be kept, and the second round will take place in 3 months. And there is a clearly consensus among all politicians that this is the best course to follow because of the situation.
Okay, Mark, we're going to leave it there. We're going to turn next to Britain. The country's Prime Minister Boris Johnson there has faced a public backlash in his handling of the coronavirus outbreak in the UK. This Monday, he announced tougher measures to contain the spread. The elderly have been told to isolate for 12 weeks, and people are being discouraged from frequenting pubs and restaurants, although those establishments do still remain open.
First, we need to ask you to ensure that if you or anyone in your household has one of those two symptoms, then you should stay at home for 14 days. Now is the time for everyone to stop non-essential contact with others and to stop all unnecessary travel. We need people to start working from home where they possibly can, and you should avoid pubs, clubs, theatres and other such social venues.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson speaking there now. The Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced that Ottawa is closing its borders this Monday. Only Canadian citizens, permanent residents and US citizens will be exempt from the new measure. From Wednesday onwards, only 4 airports in Canada will be accepting international flights.
We will be denying entry to Canada to people who are not Canadian citizens or permanent residents. This measure will carve out some designated exceptions, including for air crews, diplomats, immediate family members of Canadian citizens, and, at this time, U.S. citizens. Air operators will be formally mandated to prevent all travelers who present symptoms of COVID-19 to board a plane. This means that anyone who has symptoms will not be able to come to Canada.
Justin Trudeau speaking there now. The Director General of the World Health Organization says the key to dealing with the pandemic now is testing, adding crises like these bring out the best and worst in humanity. Take a listen.
This is the defining global health crisis of our time. The days, weeks and months ahead will be a test of our resolve, a test of our trust in science, and a test of solidarity. Crises like this tend to bring out the best and worst in humanity.
More news coming up in 15 minutes' time. Stay with us. This is France 24.